أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. Dear brothers, dear sisters, congratulations for the birthday anniversary of Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam. When she was born, we have in the tradition that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, this is Jumada, the fifth, the year fifth after Hijri. And he took her, the tradition has, he took her, embraced her, kissed her, and said this statement about her: I advise the present and the absent of my ummah to honor and respect this girl. She looks like Khadija. So therefore we see that from the very beginning, Rasulullah mentioned about the fadila and virtue of Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam. And we see that he advises us to honor her and respect her. Even though when we see in the trials and tribulations that she had in Karbala and Kufa and Sham, she was dishonored and disrespected. They did not follow these words of Rasulullah. Zaynab, Zayn is adornment and Ab is father. She is the adornment of her father. A resemblance of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in Kufa. When she began to speak in Kufa, she has different sermons in Kufa, in Sham. Ibn Tayfur and Balaghat al-Nisa mentions these khutbahs and lectures that she gives. But she is a remembrance of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. She is a remembrance of Lady Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. Because there are three factors that produce someone's characteristics. The first characteristic that is, formed or shaped isn't necessarily from our own choosing. It is from our parents. It is from our grandparents. And that is what we are inherit. Sometimes you see that you take traits from your father, your mother, that you did not necessarily even try or think about, and you just are similar to them in the way you behave. How was the inheritance of Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam? She inherited from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Her father is Ali. Her mother is Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Her grandfather is Rasulullah. And therefore you see that this waratha, this inheritance that she has is very impactful when somebody is raised. That's why, especially in Arabia at that time, because this was such an influential part of a human being, that sometimes tribes would be bad tribes because of this, because they would inherit these evil traits sometimes from their parents. Or sometimes we have good tribes, like Bani Hashim, for example. They would take these good traits one after another that they took all the way back, to Prophet Ismail, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So that is the first thing. And it is important for us, I want to, when I say these things tonight, to relate it to our own lives. Is that, brothers and sisters, many things you have, good characteristics, you have good qualities. Thank your parents. Thank Allah. And if we have, for example, some negative characteristics, we have to deal with those and try to resolve those. None of those things that we inherit means that I won't be able to change. If I'm a very angry person, my father was angry, for example. Or if I was, for example, a stingy person, and I followed the same way as my family or that town, for example, that I'm raised in, I would see in reality that there's a way that I can change this. Whatever is inherited can be changed. But when it's good, you don't want to change it. So the first factor that why we ask Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam is so much different than every other lady besides her mother. As some call her, Sadiqa as-Sughra, Allama Mamagani, when he introduces her, says, Zaynabun, wa ma adraka ma Zaynab. Zaynabun, you won't be able to know who she is. Our Ayatollah al-Uzma Khu'i mentions her as Sharikatul Hussein. She is the partner of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imagine what kind of position you have to be to be the partner of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam. So therefore, this is one answer to this, is how it was Lady Zaynab alayhi salam so great, is one is that inheritance. Father is Imam Ali, mother Sayyidah Fatima, and grandmother Lady Khadija, so on and so forth. The second characteristic, or what develops character, is when a person has been trained or educated. The way that individuals are trained, by whom they're trained, is very impactful by them. Who was the mother of Sayyidah Zaynab? Lady Fatima alayhi salam. So Lady Fatima, we see at many times, is the perfect mother. She allows, for example, in the verse of It'am, in the verse that you see that the poor come and they give the fasting, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein alayhi salam were fasting, and they decide themselves to give their own iftar. They themselves decide to give their own food to the poor, to the asir, three categories of needy people. She does not stop them. Say, you're too young, for example, don't do this. She is a mother, she's doing tarbiyat of them. Or you see in nights of Qadr, nights of destiny, she wakes them up at a young age. Or you see the instructions we have, for example, from the Prophet or from the infallibles, that when your child is young, at 3 years of age, teach them La ilaha illallah. Your own children. You think maybe they don't understand much, they do. Bring the concept of Allah, and that all power resonates with Allah. All sources of power are from Him. The child understands that. Or at the age of 7, begin to instruct them with salat, for example. So these are tarbiyat, and these are responsibilities as we as parents, those of you who are parents, we have that responsibility. Now some ask, well, what if my children don't become good? What if my children don't listen to me, for example? Did you exhaust your efforts? Did you try and fulfill your responsibilities how you were supposed to? If you did, well, there's no taklif for you because you have fulfilled your taklif. For example, alhamdulillah, some say, we have the story of Prophet Ibrahim and his son. He said, if we didn't have this story, there wouldn't be any excuses for parents anymore. So we have Prophet Ibrahim who had a son. Prophet Noah that had a son, that he drowned and did not listen to him. And when the flood came, he says, I will go to somewhere, obviously, that is very high in elevation, in the mountain or hill, because logically speaking, scientifically speaking, water goes where? Down. It doesn't go and flood mountains. So he had some knowledge. It's an interesting type of knowledge, is that I'm going to go somewhere where the water will not reach. But this type of knowledge hurt him because it caused him not to follow his father. So we have the example of Prophet Nuh, who has a son, he's not from your ahl. He's not from your family. So the second component that makes Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam, makes her who she is that tarbiyat. Yes, she's alima, ghayra mu'allama. Yes, she has knowledge without being taught. We have the tradition. But also influence from teachers, for example, Sayyidah Fatima, Rasulullah, for example, or Imam Ali alayhi salam. The third thing that I'm going to say tonight is the environment. Muhit. Muhit changes people. So we have two. One is in what we inherit. Two is what we are trained and educated. Three, it is muhit, an environment. Does environment change someone? Some say, wherever you are, this is Allah's land, the sky is blue, worship Him, it's fine. Yes, we agree with this. But does that environment you live in, does it change you? Has it changed yourself? Some have emigrated from, communities or countries that had a very good Islamic environment, now they're in a non-Muslim environment. Does muhit change us? And is it, in a way that you cannot change yourself if your environment is bad? First of all, no. If your environment is bad, you can still become the best of people. It is fine. But the majority of people that do not care or are not considerate of their environment, they get sucked into this environment. And they get sidetracked with different things at least. And then they get invited to different places. And then many of times they see sin. And that sin being qabih, being ugly, changes in their eyes. Now it becomes normal. If they saw it in their own country, in their own land. For example, consumption of alcohol, which in Islam is a big sin. In our own countries, in our own lands, if we saw this, we would be like, what's going on, for example? But where we live, this is something that in society is very normal. So therefore, does this have an impact on me? Yes, it does have an impact on me. But what we need to do is to change that environment that I am always in. That environment that I'm always in, I need to change it. I can make myself very protected, have my kids very protected, taking them to Islamic schools, taking them to schools that we have in the weekends here. Ourselves, the circle of friends that you have, you can choose very good friends. And this will cause you to have a good environment. Actually, the opposite I've noticed. People that are here in the U.S., and they have such a good masjidi friends, and they invite each other, and they have such great mu'mineen. I've seen the same people leave this community or leave communities like this and go back to another country that is Islamic, and yet they regress there. Because there they're not careful. There their guard is down. And they hang out and they do whatever they want. There, Thursday night is the night that everyone invites you for example, to hang out. Everyone invites you for family gatherings. No more du'a kumail anymore Thursday night. No more masjid, for example, Thursday night. And what happens is slowly and slowly, that person is not protected and that environment changes them. So environment, there's a micro environment and a macro environment. That macro we cannot change much. But can you change your micro environment? That environment that you immediately are with? Yes. And how should you do it? With finding friends, look into your left, look in your right, look at who one another, become friends with them, and exchange phone numbers and emails with them, and hang out with them instead of hanging out with those that are not part of the, that same religious level that you are. Tonight I want to talk about, so we said these three qualities that change a person. Tonight I want to talk about, three factors. Tonight I want to talk about Sayyidi Zaynab alayhi salam is an individual that, I'm putting away all the narrations and just facts. Just if you read about her life, you read about Karbala. The non-Muslims become amazed when they read the story of Sayyidi Zaynab alayhi salam. They become amazed at how such a lady can have patience, resilience, how she can continue this mission, how she can speak. Usually most lecturers prepare speeches. I have prepared this. It took me, I have to think about it, get the verses, look at them, and then in the end, a lot of times I make mistakes. I don't do it right. But Sayyidi Zaynab alayhi salam, without any preparation, immediately after her brother, and actually 8 brothers were shaheed and killed. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Hazrat Abbas, the brothers of Hazrat Abbas. It means that Imam Ali alayhi salam lost 8 sons in the battle of Karbala, losing 2 sons, maybe even more, Aun and Muhammad in Karbala, losing nephews like Qasim and Abdullah, and possibly more than these. These are just, so when you look at her life, she really is very important when it comes to Karbala. She is Sharikatul Hussein alayhi salam. When you look at her life, most people become amazed. Is how a lady can have so many good qualities. Tonight I want to talk about 5 qualities of Lady Zaynab alayhi salam. Can we limit it to these 5 qualities? No, we cannot. But as you say, Imam Ali alayhi salam, and some of our lecturers said, Imam Ali alayhi salam is a garden who, when you talk about a normal individual, you can find one good quality, two good quality. Imam Ali is an endless garden of flowers, of fada'il and virtue that has no bounds. This is her father. This is who trained her. This is who we said she inherited from. So therefore, this is the muhit that she has. So for us to begin, let's begin with a, this before we start these 5 calls, let's begin with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first virtue, and this is the virtue that Shahid Mutahari always talks about, for example, about Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he says that if Imam Ali did not have this one virtue, he would not have any virtue. What is that one virtue that Imam Ali, if he did not, he would not have any virtue? Connection to God. That connection to God. Because all virtue comes from Him. All kamal come from Him. All perfection come from Him. Mercy, courage, being courageous, being powerful, every attribute, if you look at it, which is kamal, comes from Allah. And how do you know it comes from Allah? Because you cannot gain it yourself. You cannot make yourself have it. If it talks about power, for example, we say, does power come from me or from God? Well, when you were born, you were powerless. A baby that's born, it can't even roll over. Doesn't have power. If power was from you, you would say, I want power. I want to run right now. When you become old and become weak and you cannot function anymore and you're just trying to balance, for example, you fall. When you become old, you see, oh, that power is not from me, because if it was from me, I would continue to have that power. So it is from someone else, which is Allah. The first attribute that we see that every beautiful attribute comes from is connection to God, which is seen through worship and ibadah. Worship and ibadah. This is what makes this is what makes everyone complete. How was the worship of Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam? You see, they used to call her the Abida of Ala Ali alayhi salam. This is one of the titles she had. Abida, she used to worship from Ala Ali. She used to worship all the time. You see, for example, that some of the narrators, some of the daughters of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the Maqtal say, the night of Ashura, she spent the entire night in worship of Allah. It is, maybe for some, it was a frightening night, a scary night. Maybe some people cannot worship. Did you ever have so much stress and you panic so much in your own lives that you forgot Allah, you don't know what to do? But she spent that night of Ashura in worship of Allah in tahajjud. It's actually mentioned that she continued the Salat al-Layl and tahajjud through the journey of Karbala. Even if she had to sit down and do it, and she could not stand up anymore and do Salat al-Layl, she would perform Salat al-Layl. This means that for years before, she practiced and performed Salat al-Layl, because now when you're very tired, you have all this test upon you, struggle that you have to overcome, that you still perform Salat al-Layl. And you see this very famous statement that Imam Hussein alayhi salam tells her before he becomes Shaheed, that he asks her to continue this prayer, to pray for me, oh my sister, do not forget me in your night prayers. This was on the day of Ashura alayhi salam, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam asks his sister, do not forget me in your Salatul Layl. So the first quality that causes Lady Zaynab to have all the other qualities, and there's other qualities I didn't mention here, for example, her being courageous, which is a great quality. All of these, how she spoke, how she acted, all of this came because she was what? A mawahida. She had tawheed. She worshipped Allah. 2, her modesty. When you talk about Lady Zaynab alayhi salam, we learn about her modesty and haya that she had. Some say, as Allama Maqani says, nobody saw her. Nobody saw shakhsaha. Nobody saw her until Yawm al-Taf, until the day of Karbala. Nobody saw her. Very possibly that the Bani Hashim, when she would want to ride upon an animal, the Bani Hashim would circle around her and cover, so make sure nobody would see her. This is Lady Zaynab that eventually, you see in the courtyard of Yazid, is coming and is forced, is with chains, bound with chains. Sheikh Saduq in tradition mentions that she was under the sun for so long, or this caravan was in the sun for so long. What happens when you're under sun for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days? What about 20 days of not having shade? They say that their faces would peel. Their faces were burned and they would peel because they were under the sun. In such a position, a peeling face, clothes that were, obviously not clean after 20 days of being an asir, a captive, that were, upon them the sun had damaged that clothes. They bring them in front of Yazid. Where do they bring them? Usually in the center. In the center, so everyone could see in that courtyard. The family of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the family of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and their lady Zaynab alayhi salam is there. And she begins to talk to Yazid and addresses and says, Amin al-Adl yabna Tulaqa, is it just, O son of freed slave, that you keep your own women and maid servants shielded, yet you lead the daughters and the messenger of Allah as captives? So what she talks about is haya, modesty. Is it fair that we are exposed, we are in front of all these people who are there in this majlis? Generals, army people, army men, advisors, even maybe the Byzantines were there. Is it fair that we are in front of all these non-mahram, all these people, while your own daughters and own family members are, this is in the speech of in Sham. Amin al-Adl yabna Tulaqa, and yabna Tulaqa refers to Abu Sufyan and the likes of him that were Muslim after Fath Makkah in the year of 8th, because they were freed after the conquest of Mecca. The third quality that tonight I want to talk about is her submission. Brothers and sisters, we ourselves, many times, Allah presents for us challenges that we don't like. Things happen to us, we don't like it. We don't want it to be that way. Especially young people, sometimes we see during this time, they apply to different universities or colleges. The application comes back negative, they get rejected. They're sad. They go to propose to someone for marriage. They say, for example, comes back, you're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're too handsome, whatever. And we do not accept you. You're too pious, you're not pious enough, whatever. Or, for example, job. They apply for this company that they want and they want to have a very good income, but they cannot, and they reject them, or they get fired, or something happens. So throughout our lives, and when you think of your own life, there's many things that you dreamed in your mind to have, but Allah, either we did not work for, usually it's because we didn't work hard for it, but Allah, there's different things that's not in our hands. He changes or doesn't make it the way that we want. A lot of people here get frustrated with Allah. A lot of people become frustrated and say that you are a good God as long as you do whatever I want. And that is not worship of Allah. That's you trying to use Allah for yourself. That's trying to abuse God. When we look at the life of the infallibles, we see that they are in complete submission. And this is the third quality that I want to share to you about her life. As Sayyidah Zaynab alayhi salam submitted completely to the will of Allah. Completely submitted. And this is very hard. Because when you talk about Islam huwa taslim. Islam is nothing but submission. And over the instructions that we have is that we also need to be careful that our entire creation is for us to submit. Sometimes you see people, they ask me questions, why is this thing haram? Why is this thing halal? Why is this thing wajib? We generally know that there is wisdom behind it. There's maslaha in it. There's mafsada in going against it. But do we know the answers to everything? Exactly no. We do not know the answers to everything. The Imam of the age has the answers of the philosophies of ahkam and rulings. But does this mean that I do not do it? If I don't know, for example, gold. Why is gold haram for men? Why is silk, for example, not allowed for men to be worn? Why is pork haram? I love pepperoni pizza, for example, or whatever. I don't understand. Why is it like that? I have to understand that to come into Islam, that is up to me. I make that decision. I research. I come willingly. But once I become a Muslim, I take on that uniform of that religion. It's like me, for example, choosing to become a firefighter. You can choose not to be a firefighter. Don't be one. It's fine. Somebody, eventually there'll be someone brave, tall, who will find the fire and fight it. But when it comes to the code that firemen have, can you go against it? For example, you say, I don't want to go swirl down this pole. I want to take the stairs. They say, no, that's a waste of time. You have to go through the pole. I don't want to keep the fire engine trucks open all the time. I want to close it. I don't want to, for example, there's code that the firefighters have. When it comes to code, you have to submit to that code. You have to follow that code. But if you do not want to be a firefighter from the beginning, yes, you have the option not to become. You cannot change the rules because these rules are there for a purpose. Many people, they come into Islam, but they make up in Islam from their own imagination. They say, I don't like this part, okay. I don't want that part, okay. But I'm very pious, I'm going to heaven, alhamdulillah, and they give judgment for themselves. So we have to stay away from this and learn that when God gives us commands in religion, or when something happens to our lives, we must have a submissive heart. When Lady Zaynab, how does she show her submission? When asked about what Allah did to her brothers and families, she mentioned, Ma ra'ayt illa jamila, that I have seen nothing but beauty. I have seen nothing but beauty. Or we see the submission that is very relevant to what is going on throughout the world. And I want to, show you that, again, people would present this as very childish to say that if you are right, if for example, what your mission was correct, then why did God kill you? Why did God kill your brothers, for example? Why did God kill your family members? If you were right, why did He do it? You see what Allah does? She answers this question. Many people today have this question, is why is Allah allowing the oppressors to be so strong? For example, what we think and, bomb and annihilate and nobody's to stop them to some extent, but which is superficial. This is just an argument from those that ask this question, then we don't believe in this. But why would Allah allow so much genocide, so many children to die, so many women to die? But He is, for example, not dealing with the oppressors, He's not removing them from the earth. Sayyidina Zaynab alayhi salam answered this very important question 1400 years ago as to why the oppressors, sometimes they get more powerful, sometimes they live very long. They don't die right away. Sometimes they get more powerful. And she answers it with the verse. And how she learned this, we say not only is she alama ghayra mu'allama, she learned it from Allah, but also she learned from her mother, Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, because she gave khutbah fadakiyah that was full of verses of Quran. She learned like her mother to speak, and she gave a khutbah in Sham, in Kufa, full of verses of Quran. And she says this verse that today, 1400 years later, clarifies things that we have to submit to the will of Allah. We have to understand the wisdom of Allah, why He gives respite and He allows the oppressors to remain on earth. Quran says, وَلَا يَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ لِأَنفُسِهِمْ إِنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ لِيَزْدَادُوا إِثْمًا وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ مُحِينٌ. Let the faithless, the disbelievers, not suppose that the respite in that time period that we grant them is good for their souls. Do not think we are giving respite, imhal, or muhla, or time. Or here it says, for example, numli. We give them time. Quran is saying very beautifully. And Sayyidina Zaynab is saying this to Yazid. Yazid, do not think that what you are, because you have power, because, for example, you are still the ruler, that Allah loves you, that Allah likes you. No, this is wrong. And she says this verse to them. Do not think that those who have power, or whoever, for example, gets power over a nation or whatever, that Allah loves them or protects them. No. Quran says, لِيَزْدَادُوا إِثْمًا. We give them, now I'm very careful with this translation, because here there's a lam here that some maybe did not translate well. There's two different lams that can be translated here. Lam in Arabic. One is a lam that is called lam that is used for aqiba. One is a lam that's used for ghaya. Two different lams. I'm going to give you the example so you can look at this verse and to see لَيَزْدَادُ إِثْمًا, how we can truly translate this word. One lam, we said, is for aqiba. Okay? One lam is for ghaya. Aqiba means the conclusion, the consequence. Lam is used sometimes for consequence. This is what Ayatollah Karim Shirazi says in tafsir. This lam here is used for consequence, not for ghaya, not because the aim or purpose is. Okay, I'm going to say what it means and give you some examples and then see how it's translated. So, لِيَزْدَادُ إِثْمًا, what type of lam is it? Is the lam for conclusion or consequence? Or is it the lam of ghaya or purpose? Okay, one example in Quran he brings is when Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Surah Al-Qasas, was dropped by his mother in the river. There, the Pharaonians picked him up, and Quran says, لِيَكُونَ لَهُمْ عَدُوًا وَحَزَنًا. They picked him up from the water, so in conclusion, as a result, he will be for them an enemy, and he will be for them, for example, hazanan. He will be for them, an enemy basically. So, did they pick him up, Prophet Musa alayhi salam, so that he can be an enemy? No. That was not the purpose of him. It is the conclusion, meaning that they picked him up from the river. At the end, the conclusion, he became an enemy for them. So it's not the purpose. So Ayatollah Karim also says here, when we look at لَيَزْدَادُ إِثْمًا, it is not that we give them respite for the purpose of, for example, of a humiliating punishment, for example, or to increase them in ithm. It is a conclusion that as a result of their own actions, they will cause more sin for themselves. So in the first way, when we look at lam here, this lam means, conclusion means as a result. When we give them time, they will continue in themselves, they will cause more sin. But it's not the second way, which is ghaya, we gave them more respite. Most translators, they translate this way. So the purpose of this life would be so they can cause more sin. No, because Allah doesn't want anyone to sin. The ghaya that Allah has for all of us, that irada, that He has, the will that He has for everyone, even the zalimeen, is that they can turn back to Allah. Allah does not want them to, be forced to go to hell, for example. He will cause them more respite. He will cause them, to have a lengthier life. But as a result, it will cause them to have, more sin. So therefore, this is one verse that there has two types of lam for those that are interested in tafsir and the intricacies of, different lams. Actually, in some of the Arabic books, I think 8 or 10 or 20 or 30, maybe different definitions for lam. In Muqnid Labib of Ibn Hashim, for example, there's different, maybe 10, 20, 30 different meanings for lam. So one here is this lam that Allah is giving respite. As a result, they will do more sin. Not that Allah wants them to do more sin. This is one way to look at this verse. But regardless, Sayyidina Zaynab alayhi salam shared this verse. And this verse is saying, why did Allah cause the zalimeen sometimes to have so much? So that in conclusion, they will be able to, they will have more sin. Do not think that now you are powerful, that this is working for you. Actually, in reality, this power, this ability is working against you. This reality is causing you to dig up a deeper place in hellfire for yourselves. Because we're running out of time, we'll say the last two things. So the third is submission. that lady Zaynab alayhi salam, she said, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. The fourth, we'll just mention it and we'll end, is wilayah. She followed whatever the Imam says. Quran introduces, says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ati'u Allah wal rasul wal ulil amr minkum. A very common verse that I'm sure that you're familiar with. 4:59 in Quran. Oh, you have believed, obey Allah, obey the messenger, the apostle, and those vested with authority among you, the ulil amr minkum. Who are the ulil amr? I was looking at the traditions before this. I saw about 50 hadith that the ulil amr in this verse is Ali alayhi salam and his family. It's Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, his Ahlul Bayt, the Imams. About 50 narrations from Shia. A few Sunni books also have ulil amr being Imam Ali. But the interesting thing is Fakhr Razi, who is the Sunni Mufassir, he says that because this verse says obey Allah, because we have to have obedience of Allah. Two, who else do we have obedience of? Rasul, right? And the third is ulil amr, because it comes from these two categories that are infallible. Allah is infallible, Rasulullah is infallible. Fakhr Razi says this third group, we don't know who he is, he says. We know who it is, but whoever it is, this ulil amr are infallible, he says. Because it comes from Allah, Rasul, and the same structure of the sentence, he understands from this isma, infallibility. So regardless, we have three beings that we have to follow. Allah, Rasul, and Imams from Quran. In 50 narrations, this is Imam Ali alayhi salam. When you look at the life of Sayyidah Zaynab, you see that sometimes Imam Hussein alayhi salam would command her to go back to the tents. Irji'i, for example, go back to the tents. She would follow. She would not use her own judgment here. The Imam is saying something, yes. Or for example, when it came to Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam and what to do, and he says al-farar, for example, run away for the children. She would follow this. She followed wilayat. She submitted to the Imams of the age. And this is another quality that we have to look at. And this is one of the most important qualities when you look at the hadith about one of the most important parts of religion. The hadith says in Al-Kafi, Bunya al-Islam ala khamsa ashya. Islam has 5 pillars, has 5 foundations. Ala salat, prayer, salat, zakat, charity or Islamic tax, was sawm, fasting, wal hajj, and going to hajj, wal walaya. And the 5th is walaya. Then قال Zurara asked Abi Ja'far alayhi salam, Imam Baqir, asked him, وَأَيُّ شَيْءٍ مِّن ذَلِكَ أَفْضَلُ? Which one is better? Is salat better? Is zakat better? Is sawm better? Or hajj better? Or walaya better? قال عليه السلام الولاية لأنها مفتاحهن. Walaya is better than prayer. Walaya is better than hajj. Walaya is better than fasting. Walaya, which is guardianship, of the authority, understanding that the family of the Prophet and his family has walaya, has authority over us, that we have to obey them. This is the highest. Wali here, or wali, huwa dalil alayhinna. Actually, the imams are the guides, they're the proof for the other things. So more important than salat, more important than zakat, more important than hajj, more important than sawm, is walaya. Be very careful of this walaya. Make sure that it's always incorporated. This is the 4th part and quality of Sayyidah Zaynab, that walaya in her life was very important. We should be in the same way struggling and striving to make sure that walaya is part of our life. When it's the walada of ma'sumin, infallibles, or Ahlul Bayt, or their family, we are very happy. When it is their martyrdom, like Fatimiyya, which is next week, we come, we show respect, we learn, we teach our children about this. The last, because we're running out of time, is her sabr and patience. Is her sabr and patience when she was passing by the butchered bodies. Remember, 8 bodies of her brothers, her own sons, nephews are there. She says, Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. She does not cry at that time. She says, Allah, accept from us, narrated. Allah, accept from us this sacrifice. Showing us, one, that she's submissive. She's submitting to the will of Allah. 2, she's asking Allah to accept. We have a tradition, I'll end with this tradition, this hadith, that what are one of the best things to have? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, لما سئل بأي شيء علم المؤمن أنه مؤمن. we'll end with this. How do you know if you're a mu'min? How do you know if you're a believer? Everything has signs. Everything has its, you can be aware. If somebody is a professor, for example, you know how they speak, for example, he's a professor. Someone's a doctor, a physician, you know they're a doctor by the way they care of themselves, the way their knowledge is, or a lawyer in the same way. A mu'min, how do you know if someone is mu'min? How do you know if you are a mu'min? How do you know if we are a mu'min? So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam asked, how do we know someone is a true believer? And he answers, بِالتَّسْلِيمِ لِلَّهِ, by submitting to the will of Allah. That's how you know they're mu'min. If you see someone in the community, whatever Allah says, whatever commands Quran says, whatever the Sunnah says, whatever from the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt say, they follow exactly. They don't do any haram, know they are a mu'min. If somebody changes against Islam in a way, they want to make this halal, they want to make that halal, they don't want to pay khums, they don't want to pay zakat, they want to change things, they know they are not a believer. The best sign is وَالتَّسْلِيمِ لِلَّهِ وَالرِّضَى بِمَا وَرَدَ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ سُرُورٍ وَالسَّخَطِ. The second is contentment in happiness or in times of calamity. They are content with Allah. Sayyidina Zaynab alayhi salam, after Karbala, says, Allahumma taqabbal minna hadha al-qurban. Allah, accept from us this sacrifice. Therefore, this fifth quality of hers is to have patience, and we in the same way need to have a submissive and content heart, inshallah. May Allah give all of you, inshallah, your hawa'ij and benefit you from the ziyarat of Sayyidina Zaynab alayhi salam, her shafa'at, inshallah, her intercession. May Allah, inshallah, make us of the Zaynabiyun, those who follow her path, inshallah. May Allah give victory to all of those who are fighting against oppression. May Allah expedite the return of Imam al-Zaman with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa Jafarjah.